now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book The Man Crisis comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today. One of my viewers wanted me to do a new series called Women in Crisis in History. Now, this is the same viewer who asked me to do the series on beta males in history that was related to my book, The Man Crisis, and he wants me to do a series of videos talking about the women in crisis in history. Now, what he wants me to talk about in this video are two women in crisis, Ma Barker and Gertrude Bainsweski, and he wanted me to talk about how these women had such a low moral position in raising their kids that it led to them looking to hurt other people. Now, I'm going to start with your Ma Barker, who was the head of a family of sons who basically were like the children of the corn that I talk about in many of my videos. Now, your Ma Barker was allegedly the head of the Barker Carpets gang during the Public Enemy era of America, where there were gangs of criminals who were out here terrorizing the country by participating in bank robberies and kidnappings, and just had people on the edge. Now, some allege that your Ma Barker wasn't a criminal mastermind and that J. Edgar Hoover exaggerated about things, but when I take a critical examination from what I've read, your Ma Barker basically was complicit as related to many of the crimes that her sons committed. But the reason why those sons went out here and committed those crimes is because your Ma Barker had a low moral position. Now, the old African proverb states a race of people can rise no higher than the moral position of its women, and as the women go, so goes the race. And when we look at your Ma Barker, a white woman, she basically had a low moral position from day one, and because of her low moral position, this is why her sons wound up participating in crime and looked to go out here and terrorize the country in their crime sprees. Now, your Ma Barker got in 1892 married George Barker, and they had 4 sons. But when I read about their relationships, basically your George Barker was just like a Pookie. He was out here, he got involved with your Ma Barker. He then had the 4 sons as he was trying to maintain his family with low-paying jobs. But once he got overwhelmed by the responsibilities, he became lazy and shiftless, did not pay attention to his son's education, and basically abandoned the family once things got hard. And that's where your Ma Barker and George Barker really reminded me a lot of the black females who are in the hood, who get involved with Pookies and Ray Rays. They go out here and they get involved with these kind of guys, but because they really don't understand their roles in God's order as stewards, they abdicate their responsibility and leave their kids to grow up to become children of the corn. And Barker's sons soon became children of the corn as early as 1910, when Herman was arrested for highway robbery after running over a child in a getaway car. And these Barker boys were always involved in numerous serious crimes, and what's really troubling is that these men were in and out of jail, and eventually, as this was going on, your George Barker wound up breaking up with your Ma Barker, and she then was out here drifting in the streets. And as she was drifting in the streets, she was basically living in poverty in a dirt floor shack with no husband and no job, and she was out here getting involved with different guys as she was out here. Her sons were out here either in prison or wreaking havoc. Now, after she left George Barker, or George Barker left her, your Ma Barker then got involved with another man named Arthur Dunlap, and he was another Pookie that she had gotten involved with. And as she got involved with this Pookie, she then got involved with another guy, Alvin Karpis, to form the Barker Karpis gang. Now, as this was going on, the Barker sons were out here participating in crimes all across the country, and as they were participating in crimes, they were being reported in the media for participating in these really heinous crimes, ranging from kidnappings to attempts for bank robberies and participating in bank robberies, and they were all in this whole situation participating in these crimes. Now, your Arthur Dunlap, the other Pookie that she had gotten involved with, was alleged to be loose-lipped when he was drunk, and as the gang was out here participating in their crimes, they decided to finally get rid of Arthur Dunlap by murdering them while they were traveling. And your Ma Barker then continued on with her crimes, even though the guy was basically dead. And this was again quite troubling because again it showed that your Ma Barker had an extremely low moral position, and that low moral position was something that she continued to participate in, even though they had gone out here and continued kidnapping people and gotten over $300,000. They still were out here looking to commit crimes. Now, what led to the end of the reign of terror of the Ma Barker gang was that the FBI found a map in the possession of Arthur where it showed the location of a hideout in Ocklawaha, Florida. And the FBI soon found this house and they surrounded it, and they had an hours-long shootout which led to the death of Ma Barker and her son Fred. Now, in the aftermath of this shootout, Fred's body was riddled with bullets, and Ma Barker died from a single bullet wound. Now, I could speculate that it possibly was the son who took his mother's life, but the whole thing was that the FBI wound up killing both of them, and this led to the end of the Ma Barker gang, which formed due to the low moral position of Ma Barker and the dysfunctional framework of thinking that she had as related to life. And this is what led to this woman in crisis, life ending in the most tragic fashion. Now, the other woman in crisis my viewer wanted me to talk about was Gertrude Bainsweski. Now, your Gertrude Bainsweski is known as the Torture Mother, an Indiana divorcee who participated in the prolonged abuse, torture, mutilation, and the eventual murder of Sylvia Likens, a teenage girl who she had taken into her home. Now, I doubt the parents of Sylvia Likens would have taken their daughters and left them in the care of Gertrude Bainsweski if they knew about her past, because the parents seem to only think that your Gertrude Bainsweski was only a good caretaker because she had 7 children by a man who she had married and divorced. Now, your Gertrude Bainsweski started out as a woman in crisis ever since she was a young girl. Now, your Gertrude Bainsweski had a very close relationship with her father, and this possibly led to her mother becoming extremely jealous, and this jealousy that the mother had was what led to the frigid relationship between them. Now, a further wedge was driven between your Gertrude and her mother when Bainsweski's father died in 1940, and your 11-year-old Gertrude Bainsweski saw her father die in front of her. This possibly led to the foundation for Gertrude Bainsweski's deterioration of her mental state, and it possibly led to all of the foundations of the trauma that laid the foundation for all of the cruelty she participated in as related to your Sylvia Likens. Now, when you look at Gertrude Bainsweski's relationship with her mother, there are a lot of parallels to what happened with Sylvia Likens later on. And your Gertrude Bainsweski, while she was in her home with her mother was very cold to her, and this coldness led to her dropping out of school at 16 to marry 18-year-old Deputy John Bainsweski, whom she had 4 children with. Now, your John Bainsweski had a volatile temper and often beat his wife for allegedly annoying him, and they stayed together for 10 years before eventually divorcing, and your Gertrude was given custody of the children. And then within a year of the divorce, your Gertrude Bainsweski met another man who she divorced 3 months after he tired of having her children around, showing me that what happened was this guy was a simp who basically wanted to get involved with this single mother, and he thought he would be the center of attention, but was overwhelmed by the kids, and this led to him winding up leaving Gertrude Bainsweski, leaving her with adding further trauma to a woman who already was a woman in crisis due to the emotionally abusive relationship she had with her mother, and seeing the trauma of the one person she loved, her father, pass away, and then getting into an abusive relationship with her husband, a husband after she divorced the simp, then got back involved with John Bainsweski, and then they went and had 2 more children, having 6 children at this point, and then they stayed together until divorcing permanently in 1963. Now, around 1963 is when your Gertrude Bainsweski had an affair and moved in with a 23-year-old man named Dennis Lee Wright, who further abused her, and she became pregnant by him twice, suffering 1 miscarriage, and then eventually giving birth to 1 child, Dennis Jr., which was the last child she had, and all in all, she had 7 children and 6 miscarriages. Now, shortly after your Dennis Jr.'s birth, Dennis Wright walked out on your Gertrude Bainsweski and abandoned her. So this left her with more emotional trauma, and it also left her financially destitute because this 23-year-old man had been supporting her financially, and now she was forced to support herself and her 7 children on the child support payments that she received under your John Bainsweski, who was paying erratically, and she was also performing odd jobs out around town, such as babysitting and doing other people's laundry for them. Now, this further compounded your Gertrude Bainsweski's traumas as related to her life, and this led to her possibly having a lot of anger inside of her, and this anger was and frustration about her financial situation and her personal life possibly led to her simmering and seething in anger and frustration about the state of her life. And after she found out that her 17-year-old daughter Paula was 3 months pregnant after having a fling with a middle-aged man, this is when her health started to decline and left her ill with a lot of different illnesses, and she stopped taking care of herself, barely ate, and these factors began to factor her outward appearance, leading to her receding hairline, sunken eyes, and an overall skeletal appearance. Now, your Bainsweski began to present herself as Mrs. Wright, claiming that she had married Dennis before she had abandoned him, much to keep her a veneer of respectability, and she was trying to put up this facade even though her life was turning into a crisis. Now, in July of 1965, your Paula Bainsweski met up with a Darlene McGuire, who introduced her to 2 neighborhood girls who were Sylvia Likens and her sister Jenny. Now, Jenny was a woman who had polio, and Sylvia was also known as Cookie because she was pretty tough and had knocked out a front tooth. And they came to live with your Gertrude Bainsweski because Sylvia Likens and her sister's parents were these travelers who worked with with carnivals, and because the mother had been arrested for shoplifting, they needed a place for them to stay. So they thought they had 5 children. The boys could stay with the grandparents, but the daughters could go stay with Gertrude Bainsweski as they worked across the country. Now, this was a situation that really led to your Gertrude Bainsweski basically losing it, because when she saw Sylvia Likens, what she did was her female jealousy kicked in, and when her female jealousy kicked in, this is what led to the foundation of what I believe her going out to abuse Sylvia Likens. Now, what your Gertrude Bainsweski saw in Sylvia Likens was a young woman who reminded her of herself, I believe, and reminded her of who she was, because when you really look at Sylvia Likens and Gertrude Bainsweski, they both came from similar backgrounds, and it looks like your Gertrude Bainsweski got jealous of Sylvia Likens being young and attractive, and she was also angry that this girl possibly was going to be able to have opportunities at life that she wasn't going to be able to have, because at 37 years old, she had 7 kids by 3 different men, and was out here, well, not 3, but 2 different men, and with her having 7 kids by 2 different men, she was frustrated, simmering and boiling in anger and seething in her frustration, and with her life not being the way she wanted it to be, what she wanted to do was what many women do when they see a younger woman who possibly has an opportunity to do better than they do, is they want to destroy that woman. That's what I believe led to the foundation for the abuse of Sylvia Likens and her targeting Sylvia Likens for her situation, and this all situation as related to her jealousy of Sylvia Likens was triggered by the father of the 2 Likens girls who were staying with Gertrude Bainsweski. He failed to pay the $20 in support for them, and as she didn't get the money for the support for them, she said, "I took care of you 2 bees for nothing," and this is what led to her going out here to go out there and beat them with a nightstick, I believe, or a paddle of some sort that her former husband once had, and this was the start of the abuse that your Sylvia Likens suffered at the hands of your Gertrude Bainsweski, who was, as I see it, jealous of your Sylvia Likens being 15, 16 years old, having her whole life in front of her. And because this girl had her whole life in front of her, what your Gertrude Bainsweski wanted to do was take that life away from Sylvia Likens, and she wanted to break this girl's spirit through her abuse. And as she was out here beating your Sylvia Likens, she was angry, and she wanted to ruin her physical appearance. She wanted to humiliate her. And at one event where they had free hot dogs at a church, while she told her kids to go out here and pile a hot dog with condiments, and when Sylvia ate it and vomited, she made her scoop up the vomit and eat it. And while her parents did come in town to check on her, Sylvia didn't talk about the vomiting incident, I guess out of fear of further reprisal from the physical and emotional abuse from this sociopathic woman. Now, your Gertrude Bainsweski continued her abuse, and as she continued her abuse, she eventually escalated her abuse to torture. And she had her children come in and help with this torture of Sylvia Likens, and to justify this abuse, she then went out here accusing Sylvia Likens of being a prostitute, even though in an autopsy, your Sylvia Likens was shown to not have been penetrated in any way sexually, but this was what the motive, the justification that your Gertrude Bainsweski had for looking to do harm to Sylvia Likens. Again, she had serious jealousy of this young girl, accused her of being a prostitute, and participated in emotional abuse to the point where she threw out her out of chairs inside of the home and told her she isn't fit to sit in the chairs. And the only way she could sit was with the permission of your Gertrude Bainsweski, who then again told the other children to use Sylvia as a plaything, and then they wound up participating in further abuse, and this further abuse was ranging from hitting her to throwing her downstairs. And again, they say they don't know what enraged your Gertrude Bainsweski, and what enraged your Gertrude Bainsweski, again, was this jealousy of this younger woman having possibilities as related to her having a better life than she did, and this rage is the thing that she wanted to do, to go out here and destroy this young woman. She wanted to destroy her because she saw herself reflected in this woman, and she saw an opportunity to do better than she did. And this is why she escalated her torture and got her kids into going out here and torturing this young girl. Now, some people want to say that it was a mental break. No, this was the jealousy of a woman, because when older women see a younger woman doing better than they are, they want to destroy that woman. After kicking your Sylvia Likens in the crotch, she then had one of her daughter's boyfriends who encouraged to practice judo on Sylvia, and around this time, your Sylvia had been tortured by people in the neighborhood who were also talking about alleged sexual promiscuity. And your Gertrude Bainsweski also encouraged other people to go out here and beat up on your Sylvia Likens. And what's really troubling is that people knew that this was going on and sadly didn't really do anything about this abuse, which was turning into torture. Now, your Gertrude Bainsweski was getting off on breaking and humiliating this young girl, and as she was getting off on beating and trying to break this young girl's spirit, she was getting off on the power, and because she saw this young girl just breaking down in the face of this abuse, what she wanted to do was escalate her torture. And as she escalated this torture, that's when she went from going out here and having people physically beat her and her again kicking her in the crotch, to going out here and having people burn her fingers with a lit cigarette. And after this, she then whipped her with a belt. I mean, some of this torture is just absolutely disturbing. And then she had her abused sexually by people in the neighborhood. And again, just sick, disturbing behavior that escalated to the point where she had been violated with a Coke bottle, and then could not even maintain her own continence. So as a result, your Gertrude Bainsweski further escalated her behavior, saying that she was no longer fit to live with humans, and locked her in the basement. And that's when she started a bathing regime, calling your Sylvia Likens a dirty girl, where she would bind her hands and feet and then drop her in a hot tub full of water, scalding water. Again, this was just torture. And what's even more troubling is that she then recruited a 14-year-old boy, Ricky Hobbs, as her personal assistant. And your Hobbs, who was an honor student from a middle-class family, he then became a deviant at supporting your Gertrude Bainsweski, and as he supported her in torturing your Sylvia Likens. I mean, he just went further and just did so many horrible and deviant things to this young girl in that basement. And what's really disturbing is that all of this violence further continued to escalate until it eventually became to the point where your Gertrude Bainsweski and her oldest daughter went out here and and people in the community and kids in the neighborhood basically beat this girl to death. And after beating this girl to death, what is really troubling about this whole situation is that this girl suffered for over the course of 2 years. Now, this whole situation led to the eventual arrest of Gertrude Bainsweski, her daughter, I believe one of her sons, and this Hobbs boy, and multiple individuals. And while several of these individuals were convicted of their crimes and sentenced to long prison sentences, what was really troubling about the whole case of Gertrude Bainsweski is that after she was convicted the first time for the murder of your Sylvia Likens, what happened was that the people were trying to help get her off, and they had to go out here and give her a new trial. Now, what's really troubling here is that even her own defense attorney believes that she was guilty. And what's really troubling is that this woman evaded the death penalty. That's what really was disturbing to me as related to the first case. The prosecutors said already, and the defense attorney even said, this woman deserved the death penalty. Unfortunately, due to our gynocentric court system, sadly, your Gertrude Bainsweski avoided getting the death penalty that she deserved for the murder of this 16-year-old girl who she had been placed in the care of. That is what is extremely troubling to me about reading about this sick, sadistic woman who basically was torturing this girl because she was angry at seeing herself in this girl and seeing this girl having possibly an opportunity to live a better life than she did. This was all about jealousy as I see it from reading her story. And as I read her story, I was just deeply disturbed by what I read about this psychotic woman who basically manipulated children into torturing a young girl, and torturing a young girl because she felt powerless about her life. She felt powerless about the state of her life. She felt powerless about the direction of her life. And because she felt powerless, she felt the only way to take power was to destroy the life of Sylvia Likens. And that is what is so sick about this woman. And this just shows, it proved a lot of points I presented in my book, The Woman Crisis, because as I was reading the story of your Gertrude Bainsweski, I was reminded of a chapter I did called Murder and the Woman Crisis. And in that chapter, Murder and the Woman Crisis, I talk about how people like your Gertrude Bainsweski can go out here and participate in their criminal behavior, and that is because they have become so jaded and detached from humanity due to their multiple traumatic experiences in life that they feel nothing for anyone. And because they feel nothing for anyone, they participate in toxic femininity because they're completely detached from people. They have no semblance of any sort of caring or any sort of nurturing. And this was all bred out of your Gertrude Bainsweski, I believe, at an early age from the relationship she had with her mother, and it was further exacerbated by the numerous failures in her life, like the marriages and divorces that she had with her 3 husbands, and the failures that she had with her raising her 7 children. This woman was very bitter and very angry, and this led to her becoming extremely jaded, and she became extremely jaded because she wasn't able to have the life she wanted to have, so she wanted to take the life of your Sylvia Likens before she could go out here and do better than her. This is the kind of jealousy some women have for other women. And when they see another woman doing better than they possibly can, they want to destroy that woman because that's a reflection on their failures. And that's what we saw here with your Gertrude Bainsweski, a complete sociopath and psychopath who murdered Sylvia Likens in cold blood, I believe with malice aforethought. And what's even worse, she got her own daughter to help do this while she was pregnant, and also got kids in the neighborhood to go and support her. She is a monster all around, and she's a complete monster who deserves her place in hell, as I see it. This monster, again, what was troubling to me is that they had to go through 2 trials, and she only got a couple of years in the first one, and in the second one she was sentenced to, I think, about 18 to 21 years before she was eventually paroled. And what is troubling to me is that while people protested her being released, the state still released her in 1985, and she took a trip to hell in 1990 from lung cancer for all of the evil things that she did. Now, some people in prison said she was a model prisoner, and some people called her mom, but this woman was nothing more than a monster all around, because what she did to Sylvia Likens was more than reprehensible. It was just sick and twisted, and this sick and twisted woman is a woman in crisis who, again, fits everything I talk about as related to the chapters in The Woman Crisis regarding toxic femininity, and also fits things in The Woman Crisis talking about murder and the woman crisis, and what motivates women to participate in violent crime like murder. This woman fits the pattern and profile for toxic women that I talk about in The Woman Crisis, and she's one of the sickest people I have ever had to read about. This woman is a monster all around. She's a sick, sadistic person who, again, tortured a girl who was already going through hard times. I mean, took this girl, had her burnt, had her tattooed. I'm not carved, she carved "I'm a prostitute" and proud of it on this girl's body. Branded an S on her in the middle of her chest. I mean, just evil things. And again, if God is just, this woman is burning in hell. That's the only place this woman belongs, because she's just the sickest of the sick. And again, this is just a historical woman in crisis who lays the foundation for all of the dark and twisted things that only the sickest people could ever do. Now, if you want to learn more about how women become dysfunctional, like a Gertrude Bainsweski or a Ma Barker, you can pick up my book, The Woman Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And you can also find The Woman Crisis at other online booksellers like Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many black women can't find a husband and why 70% of black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.